Introduction. This is House of Stamina, managed by two brothers, Ifeanyi Chukwu and Nwabueze Mbamara, present a gift of enlightenment titled Movement Against Mental Slavery. Please watch this with open mind. Let truth be our guide. Thanks.
What is colonization?
Colonization is a baptized name for slavery. It is quite funny that when we talk about colonization, it is assumed that blacks alone are colonized. The fact is that the world is under the siege of slavery. If not for mental slavery, how is it that the whole countries of the world are in debt, and who are the lenders? The slave masters, those behind world organizations like World Bank, United Nations, IMF, etc. They determine the pace of every economy. They use different slogans like austerity measure, SAP, structural adjustment program, Operation Tighten Your Belt, economic meltdown, and now recession, to create suffering by inserting artificial scarcity into the minds of the people when what is available is more than enough for everybody. They use international standards and best practices to approve whatever they want to approve, no matter how injurious it is, and to reject whatever they want to reject, irrespective of how beneficial it may be. When we talk about slavery, physical slavery is being condemned by all as the most heinous crime against humanity. Yet, it is nothing compared to mental slavery that is ravaging the world today.
Are we mentally enslaved?
Yes, think outside the box is trending because we are boxed. We are like those trying to uproot a tree by cutting its branches, which only deepens the root of the tree. How can we think outside the box when we are still in the box? We must get out of the box. When we get out of the box, automatically we think outside the box. Slavery seems to be man enslaving another, but it is man enslaving himself. He who is not a slave cannot enslave another. Our action to enslave another deepens our own slavery. We are aware of being colonized, but we are not aware of being decolonized.
Are we not decolonized?
Yes, we are not decolonized because without the desire to be decolonized, we cannot be free from colonization. If we are not decolonized, we are slaves.
How can we put a stop to this slavery?
We can only put a stop to this slavery when we are able to understand the essence of colonization. Then we can see the consequences of colonization in our day-to-day lives. Just by seeing it exactly the way it is, it crumbles because it is based on falsehood. Just like a mistake ceases to be when it is known.
What is the essence of colonization?
The essence of colonization is to change everything about us from natural to artificial, from truth to falsehood. They took away our active lifestyle and replaced it with sedentary. They alter our cravings for natural medicinal food and replace it with cravings for artificial poisonous food. They took away our communal lifestyle, which is one for all and all for one, that is based on unity, which is unlimited, and replace it with individualistic lifestyle, which is me and mine, that is based on competition, which is extremely limited. We wonder why it seems we are all limited. They took away our meaningful names that reflects who we are, like Ifeanyi Chukwu, Nwabueze, Ayomidele, and replace it with meaningless names that distract us from who we are, like John, Mary, and Ibrahim, etc.
Is there any other essence of colonization?
Yes, the main essence of colonization is to keep us ever divided for easy exploitation and indoctrination in order to create us according to their own image and likeness, which is a life of greed, covetousness, and falsehood, a life totally based on propaganda, an empty life of make-believe, which is trending now as packaging for the continuation of their agenda.
Are we still under the grips of colonization?
Yes, we are still under the grips of colonization because our forefathers were killed, hypnotized, and forced to accept the pillars of slavery. Our founding fathers, like Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Sir Tafawa Balewa, and Pa Jeremiah Awolowo, etc., were brainwashingly trained to maintain the status quo. This has passed from generation to generation till date. There is no difference between our founding fathers and our leaders of today. Also, we, the followers, because we are all products of slavery.
Why do you say we are all product of slavery?
If we are not slaves, why is it being taught in our schools that our founding fathers forced the colonial masters out of our countries? The same way it is believed that we elect our leaders. This is one of their lies, parading as truth, in order to prevent us from knowing exactly what really happened and what is happening now. Because if we do, we are out of their bondage. A lot of us believe this lie, and I wonder how we think. This falsehood is still being celebrated in the world today as independent days, mainly by the colonial pillars to prevent us from independence.
What are the pillars of colonization?
The pillars of colonization are their own brand of religion, their own brand of education, and their own brand of governance. Their own brand of religion is based on falsehood and propaganda. This falsehood and propaganda in religion has risen to a point where followers are so ashamed to associate themselves with religion. This is why you hear Christians and Muslims say that Christianity and Islam are not religion, but ways of life. Religion that preaches about the past and the future and nothing for now, yet now is the only time. A religion that preaches about the day of judgment as a ploy to deny us the knowledge that every action has its own instantaneous reward. With this understanding, we have no option than to stop doing evil. This ploy has deceived almost all of us to live a sinful life with the intention to repent before the judgment day, without knowing that life is pay as you go. Their own brand of education is brainwash education. Education that teaches us a lot of things, but nothing about ourselves. If we don't know anything about ourselves, we know nothing. For example, how to think. If we don't know how to think, how can we ask the right question? If we don't ask the right questions, how can we get answers or solutions? This is why our educated ones have no clue about the source of their problems, talk less of profiling solutions to the problems of the country. Their own brand of governance is based on propaganda, a government that exploits and corrupts its citizenry. These pillars cannot stand the test of time as a result of false foundation. The collapse of these pillars are so glaring, yet the custodians of these pillars are trying to ride a dead horse.
Who are the custodians of these pillars?
The custodians of these pillars are religious leaders, academicians, politicians, and government workers. They found themselves in an unjust system that programmed them as a tool for exploitation. They are so busy scheming and strategizing ways of perpetuating this exploitation because they assume they are benefiting, without knowing that none can benefit from exploitation. They are fully aware that these pillars cannot stand the test of time.
Why do you say that these pillars are already collapsed?
They are already collapsed because religion that seems to be the basis of morality and spirituality has proved to be the source of immorality and materialism. Religious centers have turned out to be entertainment and skill acquisition centers where we listen to CEOs of companies, businessmen and women, entertainers of all sorts as role models to their followers, without any concern about the lifestyle and influence of these characters to their followers. The more the number of churches and mosques, the more the decadence in our society. Also, education that seems to be the solution to our problems and the source of employment has proved to be the obstacle to our solution and the major source of unemployment. The more graduates we roll out, the more we strengthen the tension of joblessness and frustration in our society. Also, the government that seems to protect and provide for the people are killing and exploiting the people. The system of governance is deliberately programmed by the slave masters in such a way that no matter who we are and how saintly we may be, we are celebrated into offices and disgraced out of offices with shame and regret. This is why we are always in a haste for a change of government before expiration without minding the type of change.
How is religion one of the pillars of slavery?
Their own brand of religion is the number one pillar of slavery because it is the foundation of our belief system. Our minds are programmed by our beliefs, and the greatest weapon in the hands of slave masters is the minds of slaves. Manipulating our minds with different types of religious indoctrination and denomination have continually kept us divided, confused, and undecided. This is why religious people seek help from other religions like Christianity, Islam, witch doctors, star readers, shrines, and occultic groups, etc. This has led to promotion of lies like money rituals, using of human parts, marine spirits, terrestrial spirits, witches and wizards, etc. Religion is the most effective instrument in the hands of slave masters to keep us ever divided. Religious division is the foundation of racial and tribal discrimination. For instance, when we are addressed by our race or tribe, like black man, white man, Igbo man, Yoruba man, or Hausa man, there is no cures. But when we are addressed religiously, like infidel or unbeliever, there is cures.
What is belief?
Belief is what we accept to be true. Most of what they force on us as truth are false. For example, they taught us that we inherited sin and none is righteous, that our righteousness is self-righteousness. They also taught us that those who are enjoying sinful life now will suffer at the end in hellfire, and those who are suffering in righteousness now will enjoy at the end in heaven. As if it is very easy and satisfying to live a sinful life and very difficult and unsatisfying to live a righteous life. This is an illicit agenda to present sin as pleasurable and to project living aright as difficult, so that we will accept sin as normal instead of rejecting it. If we don't deliberately stop doing evil, how can we know the benefit of a righteous life and the consequences of a sinful life? Until we deliberately avoid doing evil, we will never know when we are right or wrong. If we don't know when we are right or wrong, we are proud to be unrepentant sinners, which is trending now among religious people. You hear them say, "I am a sinner." We are all sinners. Remember, a sinner is always guilty, and a conscience laden with guilt is a troubled mind indeed. We wonder why we are so troubled. This is why a typical religious person's relationship with God surrounds sins and begging endlessly for forgiveness of sins through prayers, confessions, penance, and fastings, etc.
Why is it that religious people beg endlessly for forgiveness of sins?
They beg endlessly for forgiveness of sins because of false beliefs. False belief is the cause of lethargic thinking. Belief is be and live according to what we accept to be true. When we believe that we inherited sins and have no power of our own over sins, we have no option than to beg endlessly for forgiveness of sins, even when we are not aware of the sins we committed. Also, we are taught that nobody is perfect, as if perfection is a destination, whereas it is only but a journey. If we believe this lie, how can we strive for perfection? Without striving for perfection, there can be no excellence. The essence of this lie is to prevent us from living aright. So be careful what you believe, because our minds are colonized and indoctrinated from birth. It behoves on each and every one of us to undergo a personal search for truth, to cast off lies and distortions from the colonial history books and their sacred books, or else we will be hurting ourselves without knowing we are hurting ourselves.
Is it possible for us to hurt ourselves without knowing that we are hurting ourselves?
Yes, it is possible, because suffering is a choice. If we know why we are suffering and have the courage to make amendments, the suffering will cease. But if we don't know why we are suffering and are focusing on things that have nothing to do with the suffering will persist. For instance, we in Nigeria are suffering not as a result of lack of resources or lack of manpower, but as a result of the presence of colonial pillars that deny us access to do the right things. We cannot keep doing the wrong things without suffering. These pillars are existing as a result of our unanimous support, and the only radical solution is withdrawal of our individual supports. Once it is withdrawn, the pillars crumbles and suffering ceases. Also, if we believe that someone can remote us to suffer, either from near or far, as being preached by the religious leaders, our suffering will persist, because, in reality, none can remote another to suffer unless one believes it. Belief is a force created by us and accepted by us to control our lives by its principles. For instance, if we believe the story of Saturn and its agents, we cannot be free from its manipulations and torments. But if we do not believe, we are free from all its activities. Watch out for Volume 2, where we discuss belief in Saturn and its consequences.
Do you mean that the story of Saturn and its agents are not real?
Yes, the story of Saturn and its agents are not real. The essence of the story seems to move us towards godliness, but in reality, their agenda is to make us satanic in nature. Saturn and its agents are known to own the material world, and today, all religious centers are preaching nothing but materialism, to the extent that the volume of our material possessions determine how blessed we are. In reality, one can be cursed with money and one can be blessed without money. All blessings and all curses come from within. The story of Saturn exists only in the minds of those who accept it. Our forefathers from the eastern part of Nigeria, out of their ingenuity and insight, understood the dangers behind believing the story of Saturn and its consequences to us and generations to come. They were unable to reject the existence of Saturn because Saturn is like darkness, which does not exist but is used to express light. Therefore, they gave Saturn a name in our native language as a warning and a revelation for us not to accept the story. They coded this name in a way that anyone who is true to himself will decode by naming Saturn Ekwensu, which literally means if you accept, it happens to you according to the volume of your acceptance.
What is the essence of the story of Saturn?
The essence of the story of Saturn is to make us believe that there is another power apart from the power of God. Once we believe this lie, it reduces our faith in the power of God. The presence of God permeates and pervades all corners of the world. Can Satan exist in the presence of God? The whole story about Satan is a big lie. Once we believe this lie, we be and live a lie. For instance, when we were kids, our parents lied to us about the existence of the ancestral spirits. During our Owu festival, we were told that masquerades are ancestral spirits. We suffered great fear and torment from masquerades for many years until we realized that the masquerades are our uncles and brothers. The suffering disappeared. When we live a lie, suffering is inevitable. This is why there is an ever-ready, unconquerable war with Satan, which does not really exist. This war exists only in the minds of liars. Liars listen diligently to lies. This is why they are continually manipulated by religious leaders and politicians. They do not accept anything that is not a lie, because truth is an attack on their person. Their slogan is, "Truth is very bitter." How can truth be bitter when it is the foundation of peace, freedom, and harmony? If we are not peaceful, we are living a lie. Lies and peace cannot cohabit. When we believe a lie, fear steps in. Behind every fear is powerlessness. When we are powerless as a result of fear, we have no option than to beg God for protection from Satan through prayers, fasting, sacrifices, and rituals, etc., as if we can be vulnerable to Satan in the presence of God, even if Satan does exist.
Is it not right for us to beg God for protection from Satan through prayers?
Yes, it is not right because Satan does not exist. All these systems like praying, counting of beads, fasting, almsgiving, penance, ablution, and sacrifice, etc., are unnecessary defense mechanisms and distractions. They are deliberately programmed with false meanings by the missionaries to take away our attention from total obedience to God, because obedience is better than sacrifice. Obedience is better than prayers. Obedience is better than fasting. Obedience is better than ablution. Obedience is better than counting of beads. Obedience is better than confession, etc. We are trying to improve our circumstances without trying to improve ourselves. Our circumstances are a reflection of who we are. When we hear them say, in advanced countries where things work, we wonder if there is any country without colonial pillars. As far as there are colonial pillars. Nothing can work. Or are they talking about infrastructure? If we do not develop our minds, no matter the level of infrastructural development, it is a total waste of time, money, and energy.
Why do you say that all these systems are defenseless mechanisms when it is said that prayer is the key?
Prayer is the key when we understand the real meaning of prayer. Prayer is the heartbeat of every being. It is what we do unceasingly. One cannot be separated from one's prayer. There is no difference between he who prays and his prayer. Our prayer is our dominant thought, which emanates from our belief system. But what the missionaries taught us as prayer is nothing but shouting, shallow talk, empty words, and babbling, which has no meaning. This shouting and shallow talk, called prayer, only lasts for some minutes or hours. As soon as we stop, we automatically return to our dominant thoughts, where we pray unceasingly. If we do not take out time to purify our dominant thought, which is our creative energy that determines our circumstances, babbling, empty words, and shouting will remain the order of the day. The more we babble, the more we suffer. For example, the volume of their kind of prayer in our society today and the magnitude of suffering as a result of empty words and babbling. One of the consequences of their babbling is that it prevents us from doing the right things by denying us access to the knowledge of how things work. For instance, students fast and pray to pass their exams instead of reading their books.
Why do they present shallow talk and babbling as prayer?
They present shallow talk and babbling as prayer in order to deny us the knowledge of how to manage our dominant thought. If we do not know how to manage our dominant thought, which is the source of our circumstances, we will be planting bitter seeds and be begging God to intervene for us to reap sweet fruits, which is not possible. We reap what we sow. Another essence of their empty words as prayer is to make us beggars instead of partners, because if we are not deliberately careful as a partner, begging is inevitable, and a beggar has no choice. This is why the prayer of a typical religious person surrounds begging endlessly for one thing or the other. Begging endlessly for one thing or the other will increase if we believe in the existence of any of the non-existing forces presented to us by the missionaries, such as witches and wizards, marine powers, evil spirits, principalities, etc., to keep us ever restless, confused, divided, and undecided.
Why do you say that witches and wizards, marine powers, and principalities are non-existing forces?
They are non-existing forces because they have no foundation. If we believe in their existence, our minds will be a breeding ground for their manipulation and torment. We have no option than to fall back to the use of their defenseless mechanisms and distractions, such as their kind of praying, fasting, sacrifices, and alms giving, to fight monsters of our own creation. The more we create, the more we fight. The more we fight, the more we suffer, until we realize that all sufferings are self-induced. We will never stop suffering. With the knowledge of our creative energy, there is no war, no enemy, because your own self is your best friend and your worst enemy. All enemies are self-created. Without the knowledge of our creative energy, there is more than enough war and enemies that will require the consultation of prophets, prayer warriors, imams, bishops, fasting merchants, star readers, and witch doctors, etc. If we are not living a lie, why should we pay someone to fast or pray on our behalf when God is not a gambler? Can someone drink water on our behalf to quench our thirst? Or can someone eat food on our behalf to satisfy our hunger?
Do you mean that secret societies or occultic groups are not real?
Yes, all occultic secret societies worldwide are based on falsehood and propaganda. For instance, Illuminati, White Lodge, Freemasonry, Ogboni, Amok, etc., and all other organized religions. They all preach about the God out there who is beyond our reach, instead of the God within who is always with us. They are all powerless. There is no power anywhere but the power of God, which is everywhere. The custodians of these groups are busy perpetuating different types of atrocities like killings, sacrifices, and rituals to prove the efficacy of their deities and to serve as a deterrent to their subjects for unreasoning submission. Just like religious leaders using the story of dreaded Saturn, witches and wizards, occultic groups to inflict fear into the minds of their followers. They have succeeded to create disunity and disintegration among family members by the use of false prophecies, false testimonies, false stories, and false miracles. Brothers against fathers, sisters against mothers, in-laws against in-laws. The list is endless. In reality, we are highly connected and inseparable to the extent that we cannot harm another but ourselves. When we consciously stop harming another, we will come to the realization that nobody harms us but ourselves. Then the fear of being harmed by another will disappear. Once the fear is gone, life becomes effortless.
Can you give an example of the powerlessness of any of these groups?
Yes, the dreaded Okija Shrine is an example. It was a dreaded occultic group that reigned supreme for many years. Yet it was destroyed without fasting and prayer. People were coming from all over the world to seek spiritual solutions, such as oath-taking, protection, and consultation of all kinds. It was a place for political godfathers to oath their subjects for easy control. Walking into the shrine, dead bodies are littered all over the places, believed to have been killed by the shrine's deity. The presence and stench of the dead bodies is enough to instill fear into our minds, not to act contrarily, or else we will be one of the dead bodies. Due to the understanding of the powerlessness of the shrine by Dr. Chris Ngige, just by seeing it exactly the way it is, he did not abide by the oath. The same way, politicians, religious leaders, and government workers will take oath of office with Holy Quran and Holy Bible and will not abide by it. The shrine's custodians tried all they could to kill Dr. Chris Ngige in order to prove the efficacy of their shrine's deity, but they did not succeed.
Why didn't the shrine custodians succeed in killing Dr. Chris Ngige?
They did not succeed in killing Dr. Chris Ngige because man cannot add or subtract a minute from life. Just like religious leaders using the threat of death to terrorize their followers, you hear them preach, if we get out of the congregation of brotherhood, or if we do not perform 5 times daily prayer, death is imminent, as if they are aware of how and when they themselves will die. The issue of life and death is totally in the hands of God. No religious or occultic group, no matter how spiritual or diabolical, can determine when and how death and life occurs. God alone gives and God alone takes. With this understanding, death loses its terror. With the terror of death gone, we become fearless. If you are under the influence or bondage of any oath, do not be afraid of their rituals, killings, and deities. Focus on the custodians and travel to where they cannot reach you. You will realize that their so-called deities are powerless.
Why are we so controlled by what we believe?
We are so much controlled by what we believe because belief is be and live. It controls our thoughts, words, and actions. Therefore, we cannot act contrarily. If we believe that we are sinners, we are indeed. But if we believe that we are righteous, we act accordingly. All our actions emanate from our beliefs. The essence is to deliberately stop doing evil and not to strive to do good. We struggle to do good because we believe we are sinners. When we deliberately stop doing evil, automatically all our actions will be good. If we believe that we are sinners, we cannot be good at anything. We must be a good human first before we can be good at anything. For example, teacher, doctor, father, and mother, etc. This is why it is very important to reinvestigate all our existing beliefs and change them for the better because they are the real essence of our acceptance.
How can we change our false beliefs?
We can change our false beliefs by deliberately observing it in the light of truth and honesty. Once the falsehood in it is seen, it ceases to exist. Or investigating and re-investigating, attacking and defending nothing, just like an extraneous observer, allowing honesty and sincerity to be our guide. Once the falsehood in it is seen, it can be changed. Nobody wants to live a lie. We only live a lie because of weakness and insincerity.
What are the consequences of false belief?
The consequences of false beliefs are living a lie and living wrongly. False belief leads to false thoughts, false words, false actions, and false livelihood. Everything becomes false. The consequences of believing without investigation are suffering, restlessness, and fear. We wonder why fear, restlessness, and suffering are all over the place. If we do not have the daring to challenge all our existing beliefs, we will never experience bliss, harmony, and undisturbed state of being.
Why are we so afraid to challenge all our existing beliefs?
We are so much afraid to challenge all our existing beliefs because the slave masters are continually creating us according to their own image and likeness to live externally instead of internally. Therefore, we quake at what people will say instead of listening to our internal directives, which is the only light that illuminates our way through the journey of life. They are creating us according to their own image of penury, which expresses itself in extreme materialism. All forms of accumulation, hoarding, and grabbing are as a result of a sense of insufficiency, while in reality, what is available is more than enough for each and every one of us. This is why what will satisfy everybody's need cannot satisfy an individual's greed. Also, we do not want to come to the understanding that we have been believing wrongly all our lives, without knowing that coming to this understanding is the beginning of believing aright, which is the foundation of peace, harmony, and effortlessness. Some of us who are seemingly aware of the force in their beliefs are still holding on to it because of fear of losing its assumed protection, support, and control, without knowing that once we abandon false beliefs, the right belief will automatically step in, which will lead us to God's protection, support, and control that is incomparable. None should be blamed for whatever bondage we are in today as a result of false beliefs, because we are free to be free or to remain in bond.
Why do you say we are free to be free?
Yes, we are free to be free because we are no longer under any captivity or compulsion to follow a particular religion blindly. Our bondage today is our choice. We are free to fearlessly investigate all religions with the view of finding the truth, because it deals with our beliefs, and our beliefs determine how we feel. When you ask a Christian, "Can you by any means be a Muslim?" he will say, "God forbid, they are unbelievers." When you ask a Muslim, "Can you by any chance be a Christian?" he will say, "Allah forbid, they are infidels." When they ask you, "Which one do you belong?" and you say none, they will conclude that you do not believe in God or Allah, meaning they would have preferred you to believe in what they forbid, because they thought man cannot reach God directly without any organized religious platform. They don't know that all organized religions are instruments of the slave masters to insert fear, restlessness, and indecision into our minds.
Why do Christians and Muslims say that Holy Bible and Holy Quran are their manuals?
They say that Holy Bible and Holy Quran are their manuals because they pretend not to know the source of their holy books. Can anything be different from its source? We should understand that there is no difference between the slave masters and the missionaries. They cannot provide a platform for freedom or a force for liberation because they themselves are neither free nor liberated. They cannot give what they don't have. Also, a free man cannot enslave another.
Why is it that Muslims and Christians are accepting their own religion and rejecting others' religion?
They are accepting their own religion and rejecting others' religion because they are groomed and indoctrinated from birth to believe and to accept their own religion as the only truth and to reject any other religion as false. They are able to ask the right questions in others' religion and see the falsehood in it and wonder why people should believe such nonsense because there is no caveat as blasphemy preventing them from asking the right questions in others' religion. They are not aware that the two religions are from the same source and for the same purpose, which is to keep us ever divided and to deny us the right belief. We cannot have the right belief and be divided, or are we not divided? Watch out for Volume 3, where we discuss right belief and its consequences.
What is right belief?
Right belief is to be continually open, deliberately rejecting, refusing, and avoiding all forms of falsehood in its entirety. It is the ability to let go whatever we sincerely confirm as false, without bias or fear of any kind. Remember, we can only avoid falsehood that we know. To see the false, we must sincerely challenge all our existing beliefs, fearlessly doubt all our convictions, and earnestly re-examine all our acceptances before we can have a flicker of right belief. Until we abandon false beliefs, right belief will not step in, which is the understanding that nothing can separate us from God's love, care, provision, and protection. Also, that God is totally in charge of all our affairs, no matter how pleasant or unpleasant it may seem. Right belief is not in the discovered like all the sacred books, but in the discovering. Keep discovering.
How can we abandon our false beliefs?
For us to abandon our false beliefs, we must decide to be true and right in all our dealings. Then we will realize that belief is being and living in God's love, care, provision, and protection, which is the essence of life. It is the nature of mankind to be inseparable from God. Due to the mission of the missionaries to separate man from God, man now believes he is separated from God. This belief has made man to experience fear, which is their target, because they want to render us powerless. Behind every fear is powerlessness, and when we feel powerless, we are helpless and anything goes. For the slave masters to achieve its aim through the missionaries, which is to make man feel separated from God, many false belief systems have to be formed to prevent man from believing aright. Remember, believing aright, which is being and living aright, is anti-colonization.
What are the belief systems formed to prevent man from believing aright?
All organized religions like Christianity, Islam, Hindus, Buddhism, Sikhism, Judaism, Jainism, Shintoism, and Confucianism, etc., and their sacred books like Holy Bible, the Holy Quran, Bhagavad Gita, Veda, Tripitakas, Guru Granth Sahib, Torah, Talmud, Menshus, the Agamas, etc. Also, their pilgrimage sites like Mecca, Israel, Italy, India, Greece, etc. Also, their religious regalia like Mantum, Fanon, Turban known as Selimi, Hijab, Sultan, Cope, Chestible, etc. and their religious holidays or ceremonies like Easter, Christmas, Eid al-Fitr, etc. because they are all based on falsehood and propaganda. Let us dwell on Christians and Muslims, which are the most dominant in our country.
What is religion?
Religion is man's own way to reach God, which expresses itself in reading of sacred books, worshiping, praying, fasting, going to pilgrimage sites, rituals, counting of beads, while God's own way for man to reach him is godliness, which expresses itself in purity, truth, sincerity, and righteousness. In compliance with their sacred books, we are led astray to be more religious than godly. Their sacred or holy books are deliberately programmed to make us religious and ungodly. This is why we have more religious people and very few godly people in the world today. For the missionaries to achieve its mission of divide and rule through religion, different types of faith are formed through their sacred books to prevent man from having direct and total faith in God. For instance, Catholic, Anglican, Equa, Baptist, Seventh Adventist, etc. came differently with different doctrines but with the same Holy Bible, just to keep us ever divided. Even in the same church or mosque, division deepens.
How is it that division deepens in the same faith?
It is because of how their sacred books are deliberately programmed for division. For example, Catholic, Equa, and Anglican, etc. are known as the Orthodox churches. They are the foundation of Christianity. All the new generation churches are claiming to have found one fault or the other in the Orthodox churches as the reason for the formation of their own churches, which has led to an endless formation of individual churches. But in reality, it is as a result of greed, covetousness, and materialism, which is at the core of religion. If the new generation churches have found fault in the Orthodox churches and did nothing about it, instead they move ahead to form their own individual churches, is it not clear that the foundation is faulty? Once the foundation is faulty, collapse is imminent. When we hear the slogan, "Look for a Bible-believing church to attend," we wonder if there could have been any Bible without the so-called non-Bible-believing churches. There is also division among the Muslims between the Shiites and the Sunnis. The division is endless. United we stand, divided we fall. We wonder why we are always on the ground. Until the world abandon the falsehood of the missionaries, there can never be unity, talk less of standing.
What else has the missionaries succeeded in doing?
They have succeeded in their mission to destroy our deeply rooted family unit lifestyle, which is communal, where we live without self-concern, and replace it with individualistic lifestyle, which is me and mine, that has increased division and suffering in our midst. If we are united, we don't need support, but if we are not united, we need support, and no amount of support can be enough. Initially, we say our children, our wives, our husband, and our family. But today we say my children, my wife, my husband, and my family. This me and mine has led to population explosion and children grown without guidance, until we realize that there is no difference between the children on the street and our own children. We can never experience the joy of parenthood. Falsehood is the nature of their civilization. When we become civilized, we lose our heritage, which can only be accessed through togetherness, and suffer the pain of separativeness, which has led to depression and suicidal tendencies that is rampant in our society today. The more civilized we become, the more we are exposed to suicidal tendencies.
What is common between Christians and Muslims?
They behave alike because their doctrines are from the same source and for the same purpose. That is why their praying pattern is the same. When the Christians pray, they beg God for forgiveness of sins and protection from Saturn and his agents, the unbelievers, those who do not believe in their doctrines. When the Muslims pray, they beg Allah for forgiveness of sins and protection from Shaitan and his agents, the infidels, those who do not believe in their doctrines. The question is, how can these agents of Satan and Shaitan, the unbelievers and the infidels, tolerate themselves and each other? We wonder why the leaders of Christians and Muslims are playing ostrich, spending money and time in different fora talking about religious tolerance when they are fully aware that the Holy Bible and the Holy Quran are programmed for division. To us, there are no unbelievers and no infidels. We are brothers and sisters and children of one God or Allah.
What is the difference between religious and godly people?
The difference between religious and godly people is that we are not victims of the mission of the missionaries. For the fact that we do not feel separated from God, we are not afraid of anything. With God, there is no battle because none can battle with God. We have come to the understanding that if we are not at war with ourselves, we cannot be at war with anyone. We might be laborers and still achieve internal peace and harmony. It is more difficult to achieve personal peace and harmony than to make money. What really matters is who we are inwardly and not what we are outwardly. The war exists only in the minds of those who accept the falsehood of the missionaries. Minds shape itself according to its beliefs. Remember, none but we alone can free our minds from mental slavery so that we can experience the real happiness of mental purity.
How are these different types of faith based on falsehood and propaganda?
They are based on falsehood and propaganda because of their source. Nothing can be different from its source. There is no difference between the slave masters and the missionaries. The missionaries wanted their subjects to remain foolish for easy exploitation and indoctrination. Therefore, they presented wisdom as foolishness and foolishness as wisdom. This is why it is deliberately written in their sacred books that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom instead of the love of God. Love fears nothing, and fear loves nothing. Nothing good can come out of fear. We distance ourselves from what we fear, and we go closer to what we love. The essence of this quotation in the Holy Bible and the Holy Quran is to create a barrier between man and God. If we may ask, how on earth can man fear his only source, which is God, without being a victim? The fear of God as the beginning of wisdom has made man foolish and a victim of fear. Fear now robs man all over. The fear of friends, fear of self, even the air we breathe. All fears emanate from falsehood. Whenever we are afraid, we are living a lie. Believing this lie about the fear of God makes us to feel disconnected from God. They also presented sin as man's evil action against his fellow man that provokes God to anger, when in reality, sin is man's evil action against himself. Sin has its acronym as swimming in negativity. The reward of sin is being a sinner, though we are told that we are sinners even when we committed no sin, like that of newborn babies. Nobody's sin can provoke God. If God should be provoked by man's evil action against himself, it does mean that God will remain ever angry.
Why did they present sin as man's evil action against his fellow man?
They did it to deny us the real meaning of sin and its consequences, so that we will deliberately commit sins. Committing sin is swimming against the tide. When we swim against the tide, we are under pressure. The more energy we apply to overcome the pressure, the more energy we need to apply. Life becomes a struggle and a Herculean task. When we refuse to swim against the tide, which is to deliberately stop doing evil, we flow, and life becomes unforced, peaceful, and effortless. We should understand that no matter what we do, good or bad, we do it to ourselves. We cannot sin against God. With the understanding of the real meaning of sin, we have no option than to deliberately avoid sin. When we avoid sin, we cannot feel separated from God. Feeling separated from God is the reason for an intermediary as a bridge to reach God, such as the only Son and the last prophet, etc., instead of righteousness and godliness, which is the only link to God. If we don't feel separated from God, we have no need for an intermediary. These intermediaries have their mouthpiece, who are the religious leaders, whose assumed duties are to guide and to reconnect us back to God or Allah, when in reality we have never and can never be separated from God. This idea of being separated from God has led man astray to depend totally on his fellow man for directives from God, which has led to serial killings, disunity, insurgency, terrorism, misunderstanding, and all sorts of atrocities among us in the name of God. If not for falsehood and slave mentality, why should religious people be running after their leaders for divine protection and security when the religious leaders themselves are being protected by armed men who are mere mortals. Don't be deceived. No sacred book is written by God, and God belongs to no religion. All sacred books are written by the slave masters to achieve their mission, which is to divide and rule. The word of God cannot be written in any book in its entirety, as it is in each and every one of us. Watch out for our new documentary where we discuss the meaning of words and its consequences.